Well, good morning, everybody. So today is the last Sunday before we get into the season of Advent, that time of year when we prepare our hearts to celebrate the arrival of God in our world through the birth of Jesus. And you may or may not know much about this day that marks off what we call in the Christian calendar ordinary time, and this day is known as Christ the King. So let me give you a bit of a history before we get into the passage. Now, some good things have come out of the Catholic Church. Mark is one of them. The other, of course, is Lisa, and as well as that, we have Christ the King Sunday, because it was actually established by Pope Pius in 1925 after the First World War, to be part of the Catholic Church calendar as a reminder to people that despite the war and all the political upheavals that followed, including the collapse of 4 major European monarchies, which had the total effect, by the way, of totally reshaping the political map of the world, this feast day called Christ the King was established to remind people that Jesus is the one who reigns and our ultimate allegiance belongs to him. Now, I grew up as a Baptist, and at least in my church, we didn't do much liturgical. We just really stuck to the best hits: Christmas, Easter. So we didn't do Christ the King Sunday. But other Protestant denominations, including the Anglican Church, followed the Catholic tradition because they thought it was a great idea. And I agree. I agree because, of course, Christ as King is a biblical idea. And by positioning it before Advent, it means that we start Christmas with the end in mind. That Jesus, born as a baby, is in fact the King of the cosmos, the one who reigns now and will bring his reign to earth. And that's going to be a good thing because his peace and justice will flood the cosmos and put everything right. Now, there are many ways that we could reflect on Christ as King today. We could think about his cosmic reign in the world now as the resurrected one who sits at the right hand of God. We could think of his triumphant and kingly reign to which all nations will submit one day when he returns. And indeed, these are majestic biblical truths which inform our perspective. But the lectionary readings allocated for today point us in another direction. For the kingdom of Jesus is not simply identifiable with kingship and authority as it's conventionally understood. For Jesus comes as the shepherd king who lays his life down for his sheep. Now, Jeremiah 23 is the Old Testament prescribed reading for the day, which we didn't read, but you can look it up. But I'm going to just summarise it so that we can reflect on the main ideas from Jeremiah 23, 1-6. In this passage, God rebukes Israel's false shepherds who have shattered and broken up the sheep in his meadow. And he says to them, and this is my paraphrase, "I will personally come and collect the surviving remainder, and I will lift up a branch of David's family, and this will be a king who will exercise power wisely and with justice." Now, in the Old Testament, in 2 Samuel, God had said to David, "You will shepherd my people, Israel, and you will become their ruler." So these ideas of shepherding and kingship have always come together for God's leaders. They were the same for David, and they're the same for God, who says he is coming, even as he says, "I'm coming and I am sending you a shepherd. So kingship and shepherding go together. So let's have a look now at the gospel reading. This is a passage which is dripping with irony. Things are not as they seem. What Jesus is undergoing in his crucifixion, in these final moments of life, is actually a mock coronation ceremony. So that's going on as he's being crucified. In the same chapter, in Luke 23, in the earlier verses, Roman soldiers have already clothed him in a purple robe. They've placed a crown of thorns on his head and put a reed in his hand to serve as a mock scepter. And it's all intended to be a cruel parody, mocking this claim that Jesus is king, which on the surface looks like an obviously ridiculous idea. But things are not as they seem. In verse 33, Jesus seems apparently helpless, being crucified between two criminals. But in fact, Jesus is totally in charge, allowing himself to be taken and crucified. His apparent weakness betrays true power, which is to choose to suffer for the sake of love. In verse 34, God seems nowhere to be found, but there's an internal dialogue happening within the Trinity as Jesus brings intercession for his persecutors and for the whole of humanity, based on his compassionate understanding of their weakness and ignorance. In verse 35, everyone is gawking, and those in charge snigger and snort with laughter and heckle Jesus, saying, "Wow, he's the chosen one, is he? He seemed to be so good at rescuing others. Pity he's not much help to himself, though." But the power of Jesus is his loving choice to remain where he is and to be misunderstood as utterly disempowered. And in verse 38, the sign above him reads, "This is the King of the Jews." The taunt is truth writ large and made visible. But Jesus lets irony win the day. What appears to be total powerlessness is true power. A power that is not of this world, a power that operates by stealth to overcome the world, a power that is able to translate people out of the kingdom of this world, the kingdom of darkness, into the kingdom of light. You see, the power of Jesus' love in this most dreadful of circumstances penetrates through to one of the criminals. To this criminal, hanging by Jesus' side, another body pinned up by the Roman machinery of crucifixion, a process so cruel and inhumane, it was designed to totally obliterate your dignity and ensure you were rendered as a non-human. To this man, by whom his own admission is guilty, Jesus' innocence and compassion for his enemies is obvious. And his awe for God allows him to recognize what's happening. In their moment of shared vulnerability, in their moment of shared humanity, Jesus' kingship somehow becomes totally recognizable to this man and desirable. You see, unlike Jesus, he knows he's guilty, terribly guilty. I used to think of him as the nice criminal and the other one was the bad criminal, but they're criminals. They're serious criminals. And he himself admits to his own guilt when he rebukes his fellow criminal who's heckling Jesus. The powerful love of Jesus gives this criminal the courage to address Jesus by his personal name as one suffering human to another. All he asks for is to be remembered in Jesus' kingdom. So little is asked, but so much is given. Jesus replies to him, I want you to hear this as a solemn truth. Today you will be with me in paradise, my walled garden of pleasure and utter rest. Jesus displays his kingship not by dominating his enemies, but by shepherding this most marginalised one home, assuring him of forgiveness and inclusion in the community of the saved. You see, the sacrificial love of the shepherd king seems a fool's errand, but it is the power that wins the world. And it happens one heart at a time. 1 Corinthians 1:18 says, For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. And today on Christ the King Sunday, he invites you, he invites me to see through the irony of the cross, to see him not as another victim of the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, but as the shepherd king, the majestic one who has descended from heaven to take on human flesh and descends further still, casting off self-preservation to lay down his life for his sheep. Sheep who have wandered off and been snatched up by the powers of this world, the powers of sin, death, and the devil. The sacrificial love of the shepherd king seems a fool's errand, but it is the power that wins the world. But it happens one heart at a time. So what does this image of God as king bring up for you? What does the image of God as king generally bring up for you? For some people, God seems strict and distant, someone you couldn't relate to, who just wants to dominate you. Look to the cross. The shepherd king stands beside humanity in solidarity and compassion for our frailness. He knows his sheep are guilty of running off and siding with the enemy, but he comes for them anyway. And understanding that is what wins you over. His total love for you is what makes his kingdom over you desirable. And if he's already won your heart over, well, he has a fool's errand for you, just for you. Who is it around you who will feel safe enough to call on Jesus by name because they experience his unconditional love through you? Who will come to know about the Shepherd King through your prayers, through your example, through your courage to explain, when asked, the hope that is within you? But it is a fool's errand. Sacrificial love always is. It'll require a little death along the way. We all have the impulse for self-preservation. And here in Australia, physical death may not be on the cards for being a Christ follower and bearing witness to this Shepherd King. But we do have other instincts for seeking our own life, ways of playing it safe in this world. The fool's errand of sacrificial love is costly. It takes time. You might lose some social currency or intellectual credibility. I mean, just try being a priest and going to a party and saying what you do for a living. That'll change the mood immediately, I can promise you. It might have an impact on your time, on your finances, on how fast you move up the career ladder, or whether you switch careers. But it's worth it. It's worth it because of the one. It was worth it to the Shepherd King. For him, I was worth it. So are your loved ones and your friends. And so are you.